I've always loved the library at night. The kind of love that pulls you from your bed at ungodly hours just to sit among dusty bookshelves and revel in the cool, silent air. It's where I escape from everything: deadlines, expectations, the relentless noise of the world. So, it wasn't unusual for me to find myself pushing open the creaky double doors of the campus library well past midnight. The lights were dimmer than usual, casting long, trembling shadows across the marble floor. The air held that peculiar blend of old paper and something slightly metallic, like the scent of rain that never quite reached the ground. Most students had cleared out hours ago, leaving only the hardcore researchers or desperate procrastinators clinging to caffeine and shredded notes. Tonight, I thought I'd have the place to myself. Perfect. I made my way to my usual spot, a corner table near the philosophy section, half hidden by towering shelves of books few ever touched. As I settled into the worn leather chair, I felt the familiar thrill of solitude wash over me. I pulled out my notes, ready to drown myself in study. Then, a sound. Laughter. Soft, muffled, and oddly intimate. The kind of laugh meant to be stifled but not quite managed. My hand froze over my notebook. I tilted my head, letting my ears guide me toward the source. It was coming from somewhere near the back, where the history books and outdated encyclopedias gathered dust. Curiosity itched at my senses. The library wasn't a popular spot for late-night conversations. For someone to be laughing here, and laughing like that, something had to be going on. I rose quietly, my footsteps careful on the marble. The dim lights seemed even dimmer as I slipped deeper into the maze of bookshelves. The laughter grew clearer, paired now with soft murmurs. Whoever it was, they weren't just chatting. They were sharing something. Something personal. I rounded the corner and stopped dead. There, tucked into a secluded nook I'd never paid much attention to, was my friend Ethan. Except he wasn't alone. Across from him, leaning in with that unmistakable, shy smile, was a girl I didn't recognize. Their heads were close, voices lowered, eyes locked as if nothing else in the world existed. For a moment, I just stood there, caught between shock and confusion. Ethan had never mentioned anyone special. We told each other everything, or so I thought. And yet, here he was, basking in a moment so personal, so clearly cherished, that I felt like a trespasser just for witnessing it. A voice in my head screamed to turn around and leave, to pretend I'd seen nothing. But my feet stayed rooted to the spot, my curiosity now laced with something sharper. A sense of betrayal. Maybe. Or maybe just the uneasy realization that my friend had a life I knew nothing about, and my pulse quickened as I lingered in the shadowed aisle, the world around me shrinking to the whispered exchange between Ethan and the girl. They spoke in tones so soft, so careful, it felt like I was eavesdropping on something sacred. Ethan's eyes were alight with an energy I'd never seen before. His smile, unguarded and genuine, softened the usually sharp lines of his face. He laughed quietly at something she said, the sound low and warm, like a secret coaxed into the air. Who was this girl? And why had Ethan kept her hidden from me? I strained to catch fragments of their conversation, but their words tangled with the quiet rustle of turning pages and the occasional creak of the library's old heating system. Still, the affection between them was unmistakable. The way Ethan leaned forward, elbows braced on the table, his gaze never straying from hers. The way her hand rested on his arm, fingers tracing delicate patterns as if memorizing the shape of him. They looked happy. Content in a way I rarely saw Ethan. We'd been friends for years, shared countless late-night talks, complaints about exams, and jokes only we understood. But this was a side of him I'd never even suspected. A sour twist of emotion curled in my gut. Jealousy? Maybe. But it felt more like betrayal, the sudden, bitter awareness that I didn't know my friend as well as I thought I did. That he had chosen to keep something, someone, hidden from me. A part of me wanted to turn away, to grant them the privacy they clearly believed they had. But another part, a darker part driven by hurt and curiosity, kept me rooted in place. I needed to understand why Ethan had kept this from me. And I couldn't tear my gaze away from the scene unfolding before me. Suddenly, Ethan reached across the table and took the girl's hand, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. His expression softened, eyes shining with something so genuine it made me feel like I was intruding on a moment I had no right to witness. For a brief second, I considered stepping out from the shadows, confronting him with my discovery. Demanding answers. But the thought of shattering that delicate, intimate moment stopped me cold. Instead, I backed away, my movements careful and measured. I wasn't ready to face Ethan. Not yet. Not while my emotions twisted between anger, confusion, and a raw, unacknowledged hurt. As I slipped away, my thoughts churned with questions. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't he told me? And, most importantly, what was I supposed to do now that I'd seen everything he clearly never meant for me to see? I spent the next few days stumbling through a fog of restless thoughts. Ethan's secret lingered at the edge of my mind like a splinter I couldn't dislodge. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, his soft smile, her gentle touch, the way the air around them seemed to shimmer with unspoken affection. My stomach twisted whenever Ethan messaged me, his words casual and cheerful as if nothing had changed. As if he hadn't been keeping something monumental from me. I wanted to confront him, to demand an explanation, but the words felt clumsy and accusatory whenever I rehearsed them in my head. Why hadn't he told me? The question echoed in my mind, feeding my frustration and stoking a strange, hollow ache I couldn't quite define. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe he was just being cautious. Maybe the relationship was new, fragile, something he wanted to protect from the prying eyes of others. But that reasoning did little to soothe the betrayal prickling beneath my skin. I found myself avoiding him. Ignoring messages. Pretending to be too busy to hang out. Each dodged invitation only deepened the growing distance between us. And yet, part of me clung to the familiar routine of our friendship, even if it now felt like a fragile, fractured thing. Late one night, frustration got the better of me, and I found myself back at the library, unable to resist the compulsion to return to the scene of my discovery. The darkness of the library felt different now, the silence heavy and accusatory. I slumped into my usual corner, my notebook untouched in front of me. I should have been studying, but all I could do was replay that night over and over in my mind. The way Ethan had looked at her, so completely absorbed, so openly vulnerable. I'd never seen him like that before. And wasn't that the problem? Maybe I'd always assumed I knew Ethan better than anyone. That our friendship granted me some unspoken right to all his secrets, his thoughts, his feelings. And the fact that he'd kept something so deeply important from me felt like a personal betrayal. I hated myself for feeling that way. But the resentment festered all the same, feeding off every unanswered question and every memory of Ethan's secrecy. The more I dwelled on it, the more my hurt twisted into something bitter and accusing. A sudden noise jolted me from my thoughts, the creak of the library doors opening. My breath caught, and I tensed, half expecting to see Ethan and the girl walking in, arms entwined. But the footsteps faded away down another corridor, leaving me alone with my spiraling thoughts. I couldn't keep avoiding this. The truth gnawed at me, demanding acknowledgement. I had to confront Ethan. But whether it would heal our friendship or destroy it completely, I couldn't begin to guess. The confrontation happened sooner than I expected. Ethan cornered me in the cafeteria one afternoon, his brow creased with worry. "Have I done something to piss you off?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. "You've been avoiding me for days." I hesitated, the words tangling in my throat. I could have lied, made some excuse about being busy or stressed. But his eyes searched mine with a desperation I couldn't ignore. "I saw you," I admitted, my voice cracking under the weight of my own resentment. "At the library. That night." Ethan's expression froze, the color draining from his face. For a moment, he looked like he might deny everything, but then his shoulders slumped, and a weary sigh slipped past his lips. "You were spying on me?" he asked, a sharp edge of hurt lacing his words. "It wasn't like that. I heard you laughing, and I got curious." The explanation felt thin, pathetic even, but it was the truth. "Why didn't you tell me, Ethan? We're supposed to be friends. Best friends." His gaze fell to the floor, fingers tightening around the strap of his backpack. "I didn't mean to hide it from you. It's just complicated." "Complicated how?" He rubbed a hand over his face, the gesture worn and exhausted. "Because it's new. Because I didn't know what it was myself until recently. And honestly, I didn't want to deal with everyone's opinions. Including yours." The admission stung, cutting deeper than I expected. "You thought I'd judge you?" "No. Not judge. But I knew you'd want answers. Details. You'd push me to explain things I wasn't ready to explain." He lifted his gaze, meeting mine with a frankness that left me feeling exposed. "And I was scared. Scared you'd think I was shutting you out when I just needed time to figure things out on my own." His words landed with a weight that settled heavily on my chest. All this time, I'd been so consumed by my own hurt, my own sense of betrayal, that I hadn't considered what Ethan might have been dealing with. I guess I was just jealous, I admitted, the truth burning as it left my mouth. I thought we told each other everything. And then I find out you've got this whole other life I didn't even know about. A faint smile tugged at his lips. You still know me better than anyone. That hasn't changed. Silence stretched between us, thick but no longer unbearable. It was like we'd both been standing on opposite sides of a chasm, and the bridge between us was finally being rebuilt. So, are you going to introduce me properly? I asked, forcing a tentative grin. Ethan laughed, the sound genuine and relieving. Yeah. I think it's about time.